In the 10th year of my paralysis, Zachary finally broke down. The boy who once said with trembling hands, "Scarlett, I will definitely save you," now was filled with resentment and poured the boiling chicken soup onto my face. "I regret it, Scarlett. If I hadn't chosen to save you back then, now, I would definitely have a better life." I didn't answer and watched helplessly as the love of my youth personally spilled gasoline all over my room. I thought I was finally going to be freed. But in the raging fire, I returned to the year when I was 18. Zachary at the age of 18 met my gaze. I knew that he had also been reborn. The moment I met Zachary's gaze, I knew that he had also been reborn. Because I was so familiar with Zachary at the age of 18. The eyes of that young man were always proud, passionate, full of light and love. As if there was nothing in the world that could trouble him. And the pair of eyes in front of me at this moment were dim, dazed, and filled with despair that had never seen the light of day. These belonged to Zachary at the age of 28. Zachary obviously also realized it. He pushed me away violently. His voice dry and hoarse. "Scarlett. You." Suddenly, a huge burst of jeering sounds erupted around us. "Yo yo yo. These two are being shy. Zachary. Kiss her. Are you chickening out?" I turned my head and looked around. KDD, EV. Balloons. Flowers. And classmates who were jeering. It was a very cheesy scene. But it was the carefully planned surprise when Zachary officially confessed to me in that midsummer. That year, we had just been liberated from our studies. The suppressed love had just been able to see the light of day. If I remembered correctly, just a second ago, Zachary should have blushed at the tips of his ears and asked me nervously and seriously, "Scarlett, would you like to be my girlfriend?" What was my reaction that year? It seemed that I also blushed at the tips of my ears, stood on tiptoe, and offered an innocent and sincere kiss. But now, I smiled, raised my hand, and slapped Zachary hard across the face. "I don't want to." The exclamations of the classmates came one after another. I didn't care about any of them and just pushed the door open and ran out, leaving the noisy room behind me. Just as I ran past the corner, my legs suddenly went weak, and I fell straight to the ground. I immediately realized something and looked down at my legs. They were fair, slender, and smooth without a single scar. They were completely different from the withered and extremely ugly appearance they had become. I stared blankly, but suddenly a voice came from above my head. "What? Finally together with Zachary? Are you so happy that you've gone crazy?" I looked up. A boy wearing a white shirt was leaning against the wall, with half of his face hidden in the shadow. The light from the tip of his cigarette flickered on and off. "Who are you?" He was taken aback for a moment. "Guess?" I asked him. "Could you please lend me your cigarette?" "What? Now you dare to smoke?" He sneered and handed me the cigarette. I took it and pressed it directly onto my leg. "You're crazy." The boy was shocked and slapped the cigarette out of my hand. "Does it hurt?" It hurt so much. It really hurt so much. But I threw my head back and laughed, with tears streaming down my face. My legs had a sense of feeling again. That's right. That's right. Now I'm only 18 years old. I'm not paralyzed yet. Everything is still in time. I remembered exactly what I was like at the age of 18. That was the only memory that I could chew over and over again during my 10 years in bed. I was lively, innocent, and ambitious. I was domineering, relying on my smart mind, and dared to challenge any fantastical things. In high school, Zachary sat behind me. He often poked my back with a pen. When I turned around angrily, he would magically take out a handful of plum candies and stuff them into my palm, smiling and asking me, "Scarlett, where are you taking me to play on the weekend?" We were both restless people. We often took advantage of the few rest days to play ball, skate, and hang out in the shabby arcade together. In the frolic, we were ambiguous with each other knowingly in the name of friends. Until after the college entrance examination, he officially confessed, and we went to the same university. We went mountain climbing, off-roading, bungee jumping, and skiing together. I was the kind of person who went crazy and didn't care about my life when having fun. And I dared to try anything. But he was always willing to accompany me in my foolishness. Others said that in Zachary's eyes, there was only one Scarlett. I also thought that we would keep being foolish together like this for a lifetime. Until at the age of 19. A sudden car accident took away my legs. When I first became paralyzed, I was very optimistic. I smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. At least I still have my hands." But day after day, being confined to the bed drove me crazy. I was naturally proud. How could I stand the days of having to rely on others even for my daily life? I tried to end my own life. The moment the fruit knife pierced through my skin and flesh, Zachary arrived. He covered my bleeding wound, his hand shaking violently, desperate and at a loss. "Scarlett, don't be afraid. I will definitely save you. Please. What would I do if you're not here?" After being rescued, Zachary proposed to me the first thing. "Scarlett, even if it's for my sake, stay alive." I looked at his bloodshot eyes. The boy who had always been unrestrained and free knelt down on one knee in front of me, humbly begging, "Scarlett, let me be your legs." So I swallowed back my tears and smiled. Okay. Even if it was for his sake, I had to give myself another chance. At that time, neither of us expected that the young lovers with intense love would also be defeated by the daily wear and tear, until we couldn't stand the sight of each other. He personally killed me. I laughed enough and wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. I stood up. Not very skillfully. The boy seemed to want to help me up. But then, as if he had thought of something, he froze in place. I tried to think for a while and finally remembered who he was. Leo. Who had chased me in the second year of high school. Zachary had disliked him for a long time because of that, but I didn't have the mood to catch up with him at the moment. I slowly shuffled towards the door step by step. It was like a big dream. And I just wanted to go home and have a good sleep. There were messy footsteps behind me. And someone chased after me and blocked my way. It was Zachary. "Scarlett." He looked at me, his eyes still dazed. But the moment he met my gaze, it turned into bone-chilling coldness. I smiled. "What? Do you want to burn me to death again? You've been dragging me down for a whole 10 years. I just don't want to live this kind of dark life anymore. Is there anything wrong with that?" I scanned his still youthful face inch by inch, full of resentment and disgust that almost overflowed. It was as if I was the person he hated the most in this world. But clearly, we had loved each other so passionately. Clearly, it was he who begged me to stay by his side. "Scarlett, since we have a chance to start over, let's end it here. Let's not see each other again. This time, let me go." I just said, "As you wish." But neither of us got what we wanted. Zachary and I had similar scores. And he completely copied my college application form. As a matter of course. Just like in the last life. We were admitted to the same major in the same school. But I didn't care too much. I was busy getting used to my new legs. After lying in bed for 10 years. My temperament was no longer as fearless as it was at the age of 18. I no longer dared to do the extreme sports that I used to love. But I still slowly picked up some basic sports and cherished and enjoyed every second of being able to run and jump. In addition, there was one more important thing. The car accident in the last life. I had engraved the license plate number and all the information of the perpetrator in my heart. The final verdict at that time was that the driver was drunk driving. But I clearly remembered that at the time of the accident, he had deliberately and directly crashed into me. This time, I had to find out. What was the real reason why he hurt me? While I was busy tracking down the driver, Zachary wasn't idle either. He quickly started dating Violet, who had been chasing him for a long time. I wasn't surprised by this at all. In the last life, in the 6th year of my paralysis, Zachary gradually got back in touch with her. At that time, I had already found a new life goal in writing, and was subsidizing my family by selling some of my writing. And Violet happened to be my new editor. She was like a fresh and beautiful flower that burst into our plain life. At first, Zachary would just chat with her when Violet came to see me. Later, he came back home later and later, and his shirt gradually smelled of her perfume. I couldn't pretend not to notice. I confronted him late at night when he came back home late again. I was very sad. But I still wanted to give him a chance to run away. Zachary. If you really like her, we can get a divorce. But Zachary panicked. Knelt down in front of me crying. Slapped himself hard. And apologized to me. Scarlett. I didn't cheat. We just went skiing together. Her lively appearance is so much like you in the past. I just miss it so much. I'm sorry. But I only love you. I still forgave him. Because I also missed that unrestrained girl in the past. Unlike now. With my inferiority deeply ingrained in my bones. I could never go back to the past. Since then, Zachary completely cut off contact with her. He still treated me with the same meticulous care. Personally wiping my body and massaging me. And then gently kissing my forehead. The love in his eyes when he looked at me was still there. But it was no longer as intense and burning as it was in his youth. Until later. He became increasingly depressed and crazy. Until later. When I was struggling in the fire. The familiar fragrance appeared again. He looked at another person with such passionate eyes. They kissed wildly in the place where I was buried. As if they had finally cleared the stumbling block on the road to happiness. I never doubted that he truly loved me. It's just that sincerity changes rapidly. Zachary. When he likes someone. Is always high profile. He openly took Violet to our class reunion. The high school classmates looked at each other. And the expressions on their faces were varied and very interesting. After all, everyone knew that we were in love with each other. Just one step away from being together. Everyone knew that he had prepared a grand confession for me not long ago. And at that time, Violet stood aside looking embarrassed. Now the situation was reversed. Zachary held Violet in his arms. With a tender and affectionate expression. And very considerately picked up food for her. He looked exactly the same as when he took care of me. And now he was using the same attitude on his new love. I didn't care at all and just ate my meal. Suddenly, Violet raised her voice and cautiously said to him. Zachary. I want to eat that. Could you please pick it up for me? He smiled. Be good. You're allergic to peanuts. Have you forgotten? As soon as he said this, the whole place was silent for a moment. He had remembered wrongly. It was me who was allergic to peanuts. My throat felt nauseous. And I suddenly felt extremely disgusted. Suddenly, a peeled shrimp landed in my bowl. Leo lowered his eyes and looked at me. The corners of his mouth twitching in a half smile. You're not allergic to seafood, are you? The classmates beside us joked. Leo. Didn't you say that you would be a dog if you ever talked to Scarlett again after being rejected by her? Leo said seriously. Yeah. I'm her devoted admirer. The classmates around us burst into laughter. And I wordlessly moved a little further away. In the distance, Zachary's eyes seemed to glance over. And it was hard to tell what his expression was. Halfway through the banquet, I went outside to get some fresh air. Unexpectedly, around the corner, Zachary was there too. It seemed that he didn't see me. The classmate beside him patted him on the shoulder. What's wrong? Just because Scarlett slapped you, you really don't like her anymore? Yeah. I don't believe it. Everyone knows how infatuated you are with her. Zachary lit a cigarette. His expression dark and unreadable. I don't know. I'm just tired and bored. He must be really tired. Taking care of a paralyzed person for a full 10 years. It wasn't just the financial pressure. But also the mental torture. After I became paralyzed, my personality became quieter. And I just liked to write and draw in the room. But what he liked was Scarlett. Who could play and have fun with him back then and was always full of vitality. How could I expect that he still loved me like this? I turned around in silence, intending to leave, but suddenly bumped into someone. Leo sneered. I said why you were acting like a madman the other day. So you were dumped. I was speechless. I dumped him. I don't believe it. Believe it or not. It's up to you. I calmed down and then said. Thank you for helping me out just now. He lowered his own reputation to support me. So that I wouldn't be too embarrassed. He smiled and said. I meant what I said. Since he has already given up on you, why don't you consider me again? I didn't answer and suddenly asked. If I were paralyzed, How long would you be willing to take care of me? Leo was stunned for a moment. As if he didn't react. What? I smiled and let out a soft sigh. So I understand him. Even a filial son may not stay by a long-term sickbed. Let alone a husband who has no blood relationship. As long as he tells me, I will set him free. However, he shouldn't have killed me. Although I had lost my wings, I was still tenaciously alive. I had clearly rekindled the hope of life. He had no right to destroy it. I raised the corners of my lips and gave a cold smile. I gradually got back on the track of a normal life. Although my personality wasn't as ostentatious as before, I wasn't as quiet and cautious as when I was bedridden either. These two inner qualities were well integrated, forming a brand new me. Zachary, on the other hand, seemed eager to return to the life he should have had in his previous life. He played around day and night, indulging in all kinds of parties and drinking parties, leading a life of luxury. I heard that Violet had tried to persuade him, but he instead said to her, "Why have you become so boring too?" I ran into him several times. Every time we passed by each other, he deliberately raised his voice and laughed and chatted, as if he was deliberately trying to prove something to me. To prove how happy his life would be without choosing me. I always ignored him and chatted and laughed with the friends around me. And every time at this moment, his handsome smiling face would freeze a little. After a while, the tutor of our specialized course encouraged us to participate in a competition related to our major. I was the first to sign up. I had also participated in it in my previous life and won a good ranking. But this time, when the competition items were announced, I saw Violet's name on the participant list. She was actually using the work with which I had won the award in my previous life. At the awards ceremony, Violet, just like in my previous life, won the second prize. Zachary went on stage to present her with flowers. When his eyes swept over me, they flickered slightly, but there was not the slightest bit of apology in them. Violet was even more proud. When she stepped down from the stage, she bumped into my shoulder provocatively. "Give up, Scarlett. I'm the one who deserves Zachary." I slightly raised the corners of my mouth and gave a generous smile in return. The next second, the host slowly read out my name. "The first prize goes to Scarlett." Warm applause rang out from the audience. Violet and Zachary stared at me in disbelief with wide eyes. Zachary shouted, "She must have plagiarized. Her work is exactly the same as Violet's." In the next instant, his words got stuck in his throat. The work of mine scrawling on the big screen was completely different from Violet's. And it was even more excellent and perfect. I calmly went on stage and held the trophy in my hands. Looking at the ugly expressions of the two people in the audience, I showed the most bright and charming smile. The work from my previous life was just one of my alternative plans. I always liked to challenge new fields. They could steal one, but they couldn't steal my inborn talent and persistent efforts. A fake is, after all, a fake. Suddenly, gave out a low sigh. Someone in the audience started making a commotion. Someone went to the judging panel and presented evidence, saying that Violet had plagiarized the work of another competition that had been held earlier. With ironclad evidence, Violet turned pale and quickly pushed the blame, saying that this was the work that Zachary had helped her with. The expressions of the people around them instantly became even weirder, and all kinds of strange glances were cast on them. Zachary had always been the most proud and cared about face. At this moment, facing such a scene, his face was extremely ugly. He directly shook off Violet's hand and walked out of the crowd. I stood under the spotlight, looking down at him, and met his gaze. After a long time, I gave a malicious and provocative smile. "Even if I gave my achievements to others for free, I won't let you have them easily." Zachary was teased by me like this. But for some reason, his eyes became strange. He stared at me thoughtfully for a long time until I disgustedly averted my gaze. And then he hurriedly left the venue. After stepping down from the stage, Leo was waiting for me at the door with a bouquet of flowers. He smiled and congratulated me, but then changed the subject. "I've thought about the question you asked me last time." "What question?" I was puzzled. He showed an extremely serious expression. "Actions speak louder than words. You asked me how long I would be willing to take care of you. No matter what kind of promise I give you now, it would seem too empty and insincere. I don't want to talk big. I can only prove it to you when it really happens someday. I laughed and scolded. Get lost. Stop cursing me. Leo helplessly ruffled my hair. Scarlett. What are you two doing? Suddenly someone called me. I turned my head and saw Zachary standing not far away. His eyes dark and unreadable, with a hint of anger hidden in them. He looked just like a husband who had caught his wife cheating. Leo stood in front of me. Very arrogantly. What's it to you? Zachary's eyes became even more distorted. But he tried his best to maintain a calm and composed expression. Scarlett. Let's have a private talk. I sat across from Zachary in a coffee shop, but he frowned and remained silent for a long time. I gradually became impatient. If you don't say anything, I'm leaving. Every second of my new life was precious. And I didn't want to waste it on him. Only then did Zachary hesitantly speak. Are you together with him? No. My life with him in the past was too tragic. How could I so easily fall into another quagmire? Zachary seemed to suddenly relax. Scarlett. I was too hasty before. Now I've suddenly realized that this is a new life. And everything is still possible. His tone gradually became firm. You're not paralyzed yet. You're still the same Scarlett as before. And we won't end up like we did in our previous life. Since that's the case, why don't we get back together and make up for the regrets of our previous life? I raised my eyebrows. Don't you forget that you have a girlfriend now? He dodged my gaze. She's not you after all. She's too obedient and boring. I chuckled. So you think that I'll forget everything you did to me, act as if nothing happened, and stay with you again? Zachary's eyes gradually turned red. There was guilt in his eyes. But he opened his mouth and couldn't say a word. In the last year of my life in the previous life. How bad did things get between us? Zachary's spirit completely broke down. He became moody and took out all his frustrations in life on me. He threw the hospital bills at me and said that if it weren't for me, he would have been able to buy a better house long ago. But clearly, the income from my online part-time job could already cover my own expenses. He cried and said that if it weren't for me, a useless person, tying him down, he should have gone on adventures all over the world. But clearly, he had once said with his own mouth that I was his whole world. He personally made chicken soup for me. But because I reached out 1 second too late, he poured the boiling chicken soup all over my face. He fired the nurse, coldly watched me wet myself and didn't do anything about it, and mocked and ridiculed my embarrassment. I also gradually broke down and became depressed, crying and screaming hysterically, not understanding why my lover had become like this. Although time has turned back now and I'm still healthy. But we have both seen each other at our worst. Only when we have loved deeply can we not forgive the abandonment and betrayal of our lovers more. We stared at each other in silence for a long time. I almost opened my mouth to tell him to forget it and just let it be. I won't love you anymore. But I won't hate you either. After all, it's actions that matter, not thoughts. The solemn promise he made with tears when he saved me wasn't fake. The meticulous care he gave me for 10 years wasn't fake either. Even if he has changed completely, I don't want to argue with him about right and wrong anymore. I'll just consider this life of mine as a repayment to him. But the second before I opened my mouth, my phone received a new message reminder. It was from the private detective I hired to investigate the hit-and-run driver. He said that the driver once had a stepsister who grew up with him. And her name was Violet. I was stunned. After a moment, I swallowed back the words that were about to blurt out. Tears gradually welled up in my eyes. And I hesitantly said, "You have a point. Then I'll consider it." Zachary was overjoyed. And the old sparkle returned to his eyes. It was as if he had become the Zachary who had deeply loved me when he was 18 again. After that day, he quickly broke up with Violet. He started to pursue me again in a big way. He often came to pick me up after class with fiery red roses. Not caring about other people's gazes at all, showing the style of a young man full of charm. He would also wait downstairs in my dormitory for a long time, just to give me a pack of preserved plum candies. Just like we did in high school. I unwrapped one and put it in my mouth. It was no longer the taste it used to be. But facing his expectant gaze, I would smile half-thoroughly and say, "So sweet." The tips of his ears turned red, and he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment, looking just like he did when we were in our first love. The former classmates were all amazed to hear that he had changed his mind again. They all came to ask me indirectly what was going on. I just smiled and didn't answer. I neither accepted nor rejected him. I tacitly allowed his approach and watched his flattery coldly. I let him think that he was getting closer and closer to success without showing any signs. And Violet couldn't stand the gap. She often came to make trouble when he came to find me. The two of them often had big arguments downstairs in my dormitory. Someone heard Zachary shout angrily, "You were just an accident. If it weren't for you, Scarlett, and I wouldn't have ended up like that. She's just angry with me now. If I put in more effort, she'll forgive me soon." I heard it, and just thought it was ridiculous. The private detective told me more detailed investigation information. The hit-and-run driver in my previous life was named Kevin, although his profile said that he came from a single-parent family. But in fact, when they were young, his father and Violet's mother had lived together with the two of them for many years. It's just that they didn't get married, and later they separated. So it couldn't be found out. Kevin and Violet, however, had an especially deep relationship because of this. Kevin was willing to sacrifice everything for this younger sister. Could it be that the car accident I had in my last life was a revenge plot by Violet after she failed to win Zachary's love? Some memories from my last life suddenly flashed through my mind. When I first had the accident, Violet came to see me. I wasn't familiar with her. I only knew that she had once been a suitor of Zachary's. But when she came, she was wearing a white dress and holding white roses. She was crying so pitifully, looking so vulnerable and pitiable. It was as if she was extremely sad for me. In the face of her pitiful appearance, Zachary lost his usual grace. He rudely drove her out along with the flowers, and his expression was so gloomy and terrifying that it seemed he could eat people. I even blamed him for being impolite because of that. Now that I think about it, his attitude was really strange. I'm afraid he already knew that the mastermind behind a car accident was Violet. But not only did he not tell the police or me, he even got together with the murderer who had ruined my life many years later. And he was willing to be her pawn and personally put me to death. As I thought about it, I couldn't help but laugh out loud, laughing at my own ridiculousness. Scarlett in the last life was simply a joke. Violet kept pestering Zachary but was repeatedly rebuffed. Finally, having so felt a sigh, she couldn't hold back and came to find me directly. She stopped me on my way back to the dormitory after self-study, her eyes full of resentment. "Scarlett, you shameless mistress. Zachary doesn't want you anymore, but you're still pestering him." I frowned in annoyance. "Between him and me, I think you should know exactly who is pestering whom. If you hadn't given him hope, how could he have given up on me so easily?" I sneered. "A man who can give up on you so easily. Are you sure you still want to keep pestering him?" Violet's expression became dazed for a moment, and soon she came to her senses. With an even more crazy expression. "Stop sowing discord. I love Zachary more than you do. You don't deserve him. He can only belong to me in this lifetime." I shrugged helplessly. "Fine. I'll give him to you." She was taken aback, and her crazy expression froze on her face. "What did you say?" I didn't answer but waved to Leo, who was hiding behind the tree watching the excitement. "Come here." He hugged me into his arms and raised his eyebrows triumphantly at Violet. "Tell Zachary that Scarlett is already my girlfriend, and let him stop having delusions." I added with a coquettish smile. "By the way, tell him that I never go back to my ex." Violet was stunned, as if she didn't know whether to be happy or not. After being stunned for a few seconds, she left without saying a word. Leo let go of me, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. "Look how obedient and sensible I am. Why don't you really give me a proper title?" I smiled politely. "No. You'd better find someone else as soon as possible." "Why?" "Why indeed?" I thought for a while. After this big dream, I have completely lost interest in matters of love. I understand that no one can love me as much as their own life. And there is no love that can remain the same in any situation. Such steadfast love only exists in fairy tales. and I shouldn't expect it. But I am Scarlett. And I pursue perfection in everything I do. It's the same with my studies, my play, and my love. I don't want love that is not perfect. Zachary loved me so passionately and sincerely in the last life. But in the end, we still ended up with such an outcome. And Leo? I can't see his true feelings even more clearly. Since I was reborn until now, he has never made any moves that could be called courting. Even his confession is carefully hidden under a joke. How can I believe that he won't be another Zachary? Leo saw that I didn't answer and smiled helplessly, skipping over this topic. Then why did you plate Rick's on Zachary? I curled the corners of my lips. After all, only by giving hope and then shattering it can you drive someone crazy. Only by driving someone crazy can you see their truest appearance. Just like what he did to me in the last life. On the same day, Zachary found out about this. He ran to the downstairs of my dormitory in the middle of the night and called me hysterically. Scarlett. Why? Didn't you say you would consider getting back together with me? I stood on the balcony, looking at him from a distance, with a smile on the corners of my lips. You're so naive. I watched you kiss in the fire that you set with your own hands. And I died in such great pain and misery. How dare you expect me to forget everything and fall in love with you again? And, I lowered my voice. You already knew that the person who crippled me was Violet's brother. Right? Why did you hide this matter? How dare you? His breathing suddenly became heavier. And after a moment, there was even a hint of a crying tone in his voice. It's not like that, Scarlett. By the time I knew about this, the case had been closed for a long time. And she did it for me. What? His voice trembled, as if he had made some kind of decision. You were so dazzling back then, Scarlett. I always felt like I couldn't hold on to you. I didn't expect that just by complaining casually, she would really take action and help me keep you by my side. I also regret it. But I also sacrificed myself and took care of you for 10 years. Didn't I? I took 2 steps back in disbelief, feeling nothing but absurdity in my heart. My life that was suddenly cut short. The 10 years I was trapped in bed. It was all for such a ridiculous reason? Even more ridiculous was that after he broke my wings, he came to hate me like that. Zachary, however, smiled with relief. But now all the problems have been solved. You've become so much more reserved than before. And I don't have to worry about not being able to hold on to you anymore. What reason do we have not to be together? I sneered and said word by word. Go to hell. Zachary's voice turned cold. Scarlett. Don't be ungrateful. Otherwise, your legs can be broken once. And they can be broken a second time. I hung up the phone without hesitation. The next day, I immediately took the recording of the call with Zachary to the police station and filed a record. Although the police officers were confused about the previous part, the blatant personal threat at the end was real. Next. As long as I have the slightest mishap, he can be the first suspect and be taken into custody the next second. Leo still wasn't reassured. And he followed me around every day. I was helpless. Aren't you going to attend your own classes? He said confidently. Classes can be made up, but there's only one Scarlett. I had a bit of a headache. Don't be like this. I really won't be with you. You're so heartless. Leo's eyes darkened for a moment, and soon he put on an indifferent look. Whatever. I don't really want to fall in love either. Can't we just be friends? I had to shut up and let him follow me. Anyway, he would give up sooner or later. Zachary gradually became a bit crazy. Literally. He seemed to have completely forgotten what he said that night and still persisted in pestering me. The way he looked at me changed again and again. Sometimes he was like the clear and passionate Zachary at the age of 18. Sometimes he was like the broken and depressed Zachary at the age of 28. He kept pestering me and begging. It was as if I didn't get back together with him, I would be ruining his life for the second time. I was so annoyed that I blurted out. If you break your own legs now, I'll be with you immediately. He stopped immediately and stared at me blankly. Soon he became determined again. Scarlett. I will give you an explanation. With that, he turned and left. I also left without any hesitation. I simply didn't believe that he would do that. I didn't expect it. He actually did it. But it wasn't his own legs that he broke, but Violet's. According to the classmates who were watching. He called Violet out of the classroom. Violet ran out to find him happily. The next moment, Zachary took out a baseball bat from behind and brutally broke Violet's legs. Violet screamed and cried, begging him to stop. He was just like a man possessed. Muttering to himself. Scarlet. I'm giving your legs back to you. Forgive me. Okay? The classmates who were watching called the police. But Zachary escaped in time. And the police couldn't find any trace of him. Violet was sent to the hospital. It was said that although her legs could be set, she would be affected when walking in the future. I went to see her with a bunch of white roses. Violet's face was terrifyingly pale. But she still looked at me and sneered. Scarlet. Zachary has completely gone crazy. The next one will be you. I didn't say anything. I put the white roses on the table and turned around silently and left. It started to snow on the way home. The first snow of this year came so early. As I was walking, suddenly there was a familiar sound of footsteps behind me. In the last life, as soon as this sound of footsteps sounded, I would immediately be filled with joy. Because it meant that he was back. An umbrella was held over my head. I turned around and met Zachary's gaze. He was wearing a black hoodie. The brim of the baseball cap was pulled down, covering his obscure eyes. I glanced subtly at his bulging hoodie pocket and said inferently, "Long time no see." He opened his mouth, and his voice was terribly hoarse. "Scarlet. I avenged you. I know." He looked at me cautiously. Then, let out a low sigh. "Can you forgive me?" I smiled cruelly. "Don't be in a hurry. There's still the matter of you burning me to death. Do you want to set yourself on fire now?" Zachary was silent for a moment. And his eyes were completely red. Scarlet. Actually later. I regretted it. Why do you think I was also reborn? Because at that moment, I suddenly realized that I couldn't live without you. And no one can replace you. I rushed in to save you. But I was still one step too late. So, I died with you. So what? I sneered. Do I still have to thank you? Thank you for bravely rushing into the fire that you set yourself and dying with me. Zachary let out a long sigh. Scarlet. I've thought countless times how happy our life would have been if you hadn't been paralyzed. If only we could do it all over again. He looked dazed and put his hand into his hoodie pocket. I stepped back half a step cautiously, ready to run at any moment. But Zachary only took out a handful of plum candies. He carefully held it in front of me, with a faint glimmer in his eyes. Scarlet. Do you remember? You loved eating this the most in high school. And you only ate the ones I gave you. I remained silent and didn't take it. I stepped back slowly, step by step, getting out from under his umbrella. Snowflakes landed on my eyelashes, making it impossible for me to see his face clearly anymore. I said each word slowly. Zachary. Let's just end it like this. He saved me once and also killed me once. He indirectly caused me to become paralyzed. Yet he truly took care of me for 10 years. We loved each other passionately. And we also tortured each other until death. Let it end here. All the past events will return to the dust. I won't love him anymore. Nor do I want to hate him anymore. I turned around and continued walking forward. The police following me would arrest him and bring him to justice. For the crime of intentional injury. He couldn't escape imprisonment. When he gets out of prison, he should forget all this and start a new life. There was a commotion. And it seemed that the person behind me was pinned to the ground by the police. I didn't look back. Suddenly, having fulfilled my obsession, a flash of white light passed by. Something came whistling towards me. Before I could react, I was pushed away with great force. I rolled on the ground a few times. The ear-piercing noise almost pierced my eardrums. But I still clearly heard the words, Scarlet. See you in the next life. I struggled to raise my head and, through the swirling snowflakes, saw Zachary lying on the ground in the distance. The preserved plum candies were scattered all over the ground. Zachary wasn't as lucky as I was. Or rather, he wasn't as unlucky as I was. He died on the spot and didn't have the chance to experience being paralyzed. I didn't attend his funeral. Instead, I stayed at home and burned the love letters he had written to me one by one. The hit-and-run driver this time was still Kevin. Because his sister was heartbroken and had a broken leg, he held a grudge and wanted to kill me for revenge. Now he will also receive the punishment he deserves. Violet was greatly affected after going through all this. Although her leg was set, she always refused to do rehabilitation training. She stayed in the hospital room, taking a large number of antidepressant pills. However, all this has nothing to do with me anymore. My life went on. I completed the studies that I hadn't finished in my previous life and graduated with extremely excellent grades. Leo had always been by my side. No matter how I gently refused him, he wouldn't give up. He seriously pursued me for many years. I still haven't agreed to him. Perhaps after a long time, I might figure it out. Or perhaps by then, the person by my side won't be him anymore. But so what? The sincere feelings others offer can change rapidly. Only my own heart remains unchanged.